Hey everyone, you're supposed to start at the beginning, right? But the beginning of the end feels more appropriate. The day this all broke. I'm posting this because I need to know, well, you'll see. The title of my Reddit post for this is probably ETA for giving my husband our $15 million portfolio in our divorce, and the answer is so much more complicated than a simple yes or no. The setting was a conference room in a downtown law office, not even a real courtroom. Divorce mediation. It felt sterile, cold, and smelled like stale coffee and expensive leather. On one side of the giant polished mahogany table sat my husband of 12 years, Mark, and his absolute shark of a lawyer, a guy who charges probably $2,000 an hour just to breathe. On my side, there was just me and my court-appointed mediator, who looked bored. Mark was 45, at the peak of his tech founder arrogance. He was wearing a $4,000 suit and a smirk that I just wanted to wipe off his face. He thought I was stupid. He really, truly, for 12 years, thought I was just the pretty, organized wife who managed our social calendar and hosted his investor dinners. He had no idea I was the one balancing the books for the first 5 years of his stupid startup while he was out networking. The mediator cleared his throat. Ms. Jensen, Sarah, we are looking at the division of assets. Your husband's legal team has proposed a 70-30 split in his favor, citing his role as the primary earner. Mark's lawyer leaned forward. Given that my client's intellectual property is what generated the wealth, and Mrs. Mead, Jensen has not been formally employed for over a decade. I held up my hand. It was shaking, but I held it up. Stop, please. The room went silent. Mark's smirk widened. He thought I was about to cry, to beg. I looked at the mediator, then at Mark. I don't want 30%, I said. The mediator sighed, probably expecting me to ask for 50. I don't want any of it. You could have heard a pin drop. Mark's lawyer actually froze, his pen hovering over a legal pad. Mark's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated confusion. What did you say? Mark asked, leaning forward. I said, I repeated, trying to keep my voice even, I waive my claim to the stock portfolio, to the art collection, to the house in the Hamptons, to all of it. He can have it. I just want my personal items, my car, and I want this to be over. Today. The mediator looked like I'd slapped him. Ms. Jensen, Sarah, we are talking about a significant amount of assets, well over $15 million. You are entitled to at least half. I shook my head. I know what I'm entitled to, and I know what I'm giving up. I don't want it. Mark and his lawyer looked at each other, stunned, and then that insidious smirk returned to my husband's face. He thought I was broken. He thought he had finally, completely shattered me into a million pieces, and this was my surrender. Well, his lawyer stammered, recovering quickly, if Ms. Jensen is of sound mind and willingly waives her claim, we will draft the papers immediately. They couldn't believe their luck. They were so eager to get my signature. They probably would have skipped all the other formalities if they could. I signed. I signed away 12 years of my life, 12 years of work, 12 years of supporting him, believing in him, and enduring him. I walked out of that office building into the bright sunlight, took my first deep breath in a decade, and hailed a cab. I didn't go to my friend's house. I didn't go to a bar. I went to another lawyer's office on the other side of town. A much older, quieter man, Mr. Harrison, my father's estate lawyer. He was waiting for me. It's done, I told him. He nodded grimly. Then the first part is over. Now for the second. He slid a thick binder across the desk. As we discussed, your father's passing was sudden, Sarah, and he was very specific about the timing of this. My dad and we hadn't spoken in 4 years. Not since Mark had convinced me that my father was toxic, that he was trying to control my life. The truth, I'd found out only 2 weeks prior when Mr. Harrison first contacted me, was much darker. My father hadn't abandoned me. Mark had forced him to. Mark had discovered that my father's business partner in his high-profile literary agency had been embezzling money for years. Mark, always the opportunist, didn't report it. He blackmailed my father. He said he'd expose the partner, ruin the agency's reputation, a company my father had built from scratch, unless my dad cut me off completely. No contact, no money, nothing. Mark wanted me isolated. He wanted me all to himself, dependent and weak. And my father, trying to protect his legacy and his employees, tragically agreed. Mr. Harrison opened the binder. Your father left you everything. Sarah, he named you sole successor and CEO of the agency. He also left you a letter. He handed me a sealed envelope. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open it. It was my dad's handwriting. My dearest girl, it started. If you are reading this, I am gone, and I hope it means you are finally free. Forgive me for being a coward. I should have fought him. I should have chosen you over the company. But Mark, he was a snake. I knew what he was. I'm leaving you the agency, not as a burden, but as a weapon. I've spent the last 4 years cleaning it up, getting it ready. It's stable. It's worth nearly $25 million. It's yours. Use it to build a life he can never touch. Use it to be free. I love you. I sat there, in that quiet, dusty office, and I cried. I cried for my dad, for the lost years, and I cried in relief. Because Mark thought he had just taken me for $15 million. He had no idea I had just inherited $25 million, and he definitely had no idea what I had really given him in that mediation room. It wasn't just the assets. It was the trap. That was the first hour of my new life. It's a lot, I know. Should I keep going and tell you what happened next? Okay, so you're still here. Good. Because this is the part that gets messy. This is the part where I look back and I don't recognize the person I was, but I'm also incredibly proud of her. So I have this letter from my dad. I have this new company I know nothing about, and I have the knowledge of what my husband, my ex-husband now, did to my family. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The blackmail was vile, but what he did to me, that was the real crime. I have to back up a few weeks before the mediation to the day it all started, the real day one. I was trying to find a simple tax document, one of our old joint returns. Mark always handled the finances, said it was too complex for me, that his startup had all these complicated write-offs and equity structures. I just let him. It was easier. I was busy managing the household, the renovations, the charity boards he wanted me to sit on to make him look good. But I needed this form, and he was on a business trip in Miami. Again. I went into his home office, which was always kept locked. I knew the code. Of course I did. 7171, his birthday. So original. Inside, it was pristine. But in his desk drawer, under a pile of useless tech conference lanyards, I found a different set of files. Not for his main startup, for a shell corporation, an LLC I'd never heard of. SJ Consulting, it was called. SJ, Sarah Jensen, my initials. I felt my blood run cold. I started digging. I found bank statements. I found loan applications. And then I found the tax documents. This LLC, registered in my name, in a state I'd never even lived in, had apparently earned $4.8 million in consulting fees over the last 2 years, and it hadn't paid a single cent in taxes, not one. He was funneling his consulting income, money he was likely siphoning from his own investors, into a shell company in my name, planning to let it sit until the IRS came knocking. And when they did, who would they come for? Sarah Jensen, the unemployed housewife with the mysteriously wealthy LLC. He was setting me up. He was building a financial bomb and putting my name on it so when he was ready to leave, he could just walk away clean, leaving me with the IRS, millions in debt and probably facing criminal charges. I nearly threw up on his expensive Persian rug. I sat on the floor for an hour, just vibrating. The betrayal was so deep, so cold. This wasn't cheating. This wasn't falling out of love. This was calculated. This was sociopathic. I grabbed the files, shoved them in a duffel bag, and walked out. I called my best friend from college, Chloe. Chloe isn't just smart. She's a forensic accountant. I've never been more grateful for her very specific, very nerdy career choice. We met at a 24-hour diner at 2 a.m. I dumped the files on the table over greasy fries. She just looked at me, her eyes wide, and said, "Oh, Sarah, what did he do?" She took the files. She didn't sleep for 2 days. She came back to me with a full breakdown. It was worse than I thought. The $4.8 million income was just the start. He'd also used the LLC, my LLC, to secure private investor loans, hard money loans, the kind of people you really don't want to owe money to. He'd secured them against our shared assets, our art collection, our stock portfolio. He'd taken out nearly $8 million in these high-interest loans, and the payments were about to come due. So, let's do the math. $4.8 million in untaxed income, which the IRS would want at least 40% of, plus penalties. Let's call it $3 million, plus $8 million in private loans. That's $11 million in debt. $11 million in debt, all tied to an LLC with my name on it, and all secured by the $15 million in assets we shared. He was underwater. The whole time he was buying me Cartier bracelets and telling his friends how well his startup was doing. He was drowning in debt. His debt. But legally, my debt. And then, Chloe handed me one more folder. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," she said. "I hired a private investigator, Mike. I paid for it out of pocket. I had a feeling." I opened it. It was photos, the business trip in Miami. It was Mark on a yacht, and he wasn't alone. He was with a 24-year-old, God, she looked like a child, kissing her, his hands all over her. Her name was Jessica. She was, of course, an intern at his company. The PI had been following them for a week. This wasn't a new fling. The PI had records of them at a condo in South Beach, a condo he had bought. The dates on the photos went back 2 years. He had been living a complete separate life. The woman, the debt, the IRS, it was all a house of cards. And he had planned to make me the one who took the fall. This is the part where I need you guys. What would you have done? Would you have just taken the evidence to the police then and there? Or would you have done what I did? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely dying to know. Your comments. Wow. A lot of you are creative and angry. I see you. A lot of you said, go to the police. Destroy him. Take him for everything. And I get it. That was my first instinct. I wanted to see him in handcuffs. I wanted to see him burn. But then, my lawyer, the new one Chloe found for me. Not Mr. Harrison, but my divorce lawyer, a woman named Diana who looked sweet but was basically a killer whale in a pantsuit. She laid out the reality. If I went to the police, it would become a massive criminal case. Everything would be frozen. The assets, the accounts, everything. The IRS would freeze it. The private lenders would sue. By the time the dust settled, the lawyers would have taken most of it, the government would have taken the rest, and Mark and I would be left fighting over scraps. I'd be tied to him in court for another 5, maybe 10 years. I'd be the victim in a long, drawn-out public trial. And he would love that. He would play the martyr. He'd say I was the vindictive wife. He'd lie. He'd say I knew about the LLC, that I was part of it. It would be my word against his. And he was so good at convincing people he was the golden boy. I didn't want to be a victim, and I didn't want to be tied to him for one more second. I wanted to be free, and I wanted justice. Real justice. The kind where the consequences for his actions landed directly on his head. So Diana and I sat down with Chloe's forensic report. We looked at the $15 million in Otter's assets. We looked at the $11 million in debt. And Diana smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Sarah," she said, "in this state, assets and liabilities acquired during the marriage are community property. They're a package deal. You take the house, you take the mortgage. You take the stocks, you take the margin loan." I looked at her, not understanding. "But I don't want the assets, remember? I'm walking away." And that's when she laid out the plan. "No," she said, her smile getting wider. "You're not just walking away. You are gifting him your half. You are signing over your 50% claim to the entire community property portfolio. And in doing so, you are also signing over your 50% claim to the community debt, which is all tied to that portfolio anyway." The trap. It was so simple and so beautiful. If I fought him for my $7.5 million, my half of the $15 million, I would also be legally responsible for my half of the $11 million in debt. I'd walk away with almost nothing, and he'd still have his half. But if I gave him my half, if I renounced my claim to the assets, I was also renouncing my claim to the liabilities attached to those assets. He, as the sole, gleeful new owner of the entire $15 million portfolio, would also become the sole owner of the entire $11 million in debt. He'd be left with $4 million, right? Still a win for him. Wrong. Chloe pointed out that the $8 million in private loans had acceleration clauses. The moment the ownership structure of the collateral, the art and stocks, changed, i.e., when it went from Mark and Sarah Jensen to just Mark Jensen, the entire loan amount was due, immediately. And the IRS? Oh, they don't care about divorce agreements. They just care about who owns the thing they can seize. By taking the full portfolio, he was painting a giant, flashing neon target on his back. He wasn't just taking on the debt, He was pulling the pin on a grenade. So, we had the plan. This is when my dad's lawyer, Mr. Harrison, called me with the news about my dad's death. It was a sign. It was the universe handing me my armor. My dad's $25 million inheritance wasn't just a safety net, it was my war chest. It meant I could afford to walk away from the $15 million. I could afford to play the part of the broken, penniless wife. Which brings us back to that mediation room. Me holding up my shaking hand. It wasn't shaking because I was scared. It was shaking with adrenaline. When I said, "He can have it all," the look on his face. It wasn't just confusion. It was contempt. He pitied me. He thought I was so pathetic, so utterly defeated that I was just giving up. That was the best part. He didn't just take the assets. He believed he had beaten me for them. He thought he'd won. He signed the papers so fast, so eager. He wanted it in writing. He wanted it finalized before I could change my mind. He wanted to be free to go to Miami, to his 24-year-old mistress with his $15 million. And Mike, the PI, I kept him on. He followed them from the lawyer's office. Mark met Jessica at the airport. He'd flown her in for the victory. Mike followed them to the most expensive restaurant in New York, Per Se, a $1,000 plate kind of place. Mike sat at the bar. He said they were loud, toasting. "To new beginnings," Mark kept saying, loud enough for everyone to hear, "to getting everything we deserve." Jessica was, according to Mike, already shopping for Porsches on her phone. Mark was texting his tech buddies. "Wife is gone. Left with nothing but the clothes on her back. I'm free and I'm rich." He thought he was the king of the world. He had his girl, he had his intellectual property, and he had my $7.5 million. He went to sleep that night in the South Beach condo he'd bought with fraudulent loan money, believing he was the smartest man alive. He had no idea that 9 a.m. the next morning was when the grenade pin was scheduled to be pulled. 9 a.m. Wednesday morning, less than 24 hours after I signed those papers. I was in a small, furnished rental I'd secured under my maiden name. Chloe was with me. Diana, my lawyer, was on speakerphone. We called it Operation Payback. It was a three-pronged attack. At 9:01 a.m., Diana electronically filed the fully executed, signed, and notarized divorce decree with the courts and simultaneously sent copies to the two private investment firms Mark had borrowed the $8 million from. Notice of change in asset ownership, the cover letter read. As per Section 4.b of your loan agreement, we are informing you that the collateral is now the sole property of Mr. Mark Jensen. As such, the acceleration clause is now in effect. Payment in full is expected within 24 hours. That was prong one. The lenders, the sharks. At 9:02 a.m., Chloe, my beautiful, brilliant forensic accountant, made her call. She had prepared a full anonymous whistleblower package, all the files I'd taken, the LLC formation docs, the bank statements showing the $4.8 million in deposits, the complete lack of tax filings. She sent it all to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The tip line operator probably thought it was a prank until they opened the file. Chloe just said, "You're going to want to look at SJ Consulting, LLC, and its sole officer, Mr. Mark Jensen, who just took possession of $15 million in liquid assets. Happy hunting." That was prong two, the feds. Prong three was me. I just sat there, and I waited. It didn't take long. At 9:35 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mark. I hadn't blocked his number, not yet. I let it ring, and I looked at Chloe. She just nodded. I picked up. "Hello?" I said, trying to sound weak, maybe a little sniffly. "Sarah." It was a scream. Not a word. A scream. The sound of pure animal panic. "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" I could hear him pacing, breathing hard. "Mark, what are you talking about? I'm just packing my things. The bank, the investors, they're calling me. They want $8 million. They say it's due today. They're seizing the art. They're freezing the portfolio. What did you do?" I took a sip of my coffee. "Mark, I don't know what you're talking about. I gave you the portfolio. It's yours. Remember? You won. It's all yours." There was a pause. A terrible, silent pause as the gears in his tiny, sociopathic brain finally started to turn. The debt, he whispered. "The loans." "Oh," I said, as if I just realized it. "You mean the $8 million in loans you took out against our shared assets, using that LLC you created? The SJ Consulting one? You mean that debt?" The silence on the other end was deafening. You You knew, he said. It wasn't a question. You knew. I knew, I confirmed. My voice wasn't shaky anymore. It was clear. It was cold. You knew and you let me. You tricked me, he screamed, his voice cracking. Tricked you? I almost laughed. Mark, you forged my name. You blackmailed my father. You set me up to take the fall for your tax fraud. I didn't trick you. I just stopped playing. I gave you exactly what you wanted. You wanted it all. You got it all. The assets, the liabilities, the whole toxic mess. It's all yours, Mark. Congratulations on your big win. I could hear another voice in the background. Jessica. Mark, what's wrong? Why is your card declined? The Porsche dealer just called. He wasn't paying attention to her. You bitch, he snarled at me. You calculating bitch. I'll sue you. I'll tell them you were in on it. I'll tell them what, Mark? Diana, my lawyer, suddenly cut in on the line. Tell them what, Mr. Jensen? That your ex-wife willingly gave you the assets you already had liens on? That she gifted you the portfolio you used for fraudulent loans? That she walked away from $15 million just to be free of you? Who exactly do you think is going to believe you? The private lenders you just defaulted on? Or the IRS, who I believe just received a very interesting package about your consulting business? He hung up. Just click. Chloe and I just sat there in the quiet rental, and then we started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was this broken, hysterical, gasping sound. We laughed until we were both crying. Because it was over. He couldn't touch me. He couldn't hurt me or my family ever again. He was trapped in the cage he had built, brick by brick, for me. The rest of the day was a blur of calls. His lawyer called Diana, screaming. Diana just sent him the file on the IRS fraud and the blackmail. He stopped screaming. In fact, he dropped Mark as a client an hour later, citing conflict of interest. The art collection was seized by noon. The stock portfolio was frozen by 2 p.m. By sundown, Mark Jensen, the tech golden boy, was worth less than zero. He had lost $15 million and he still owed the IRS. And Jessica? The PI, Mike, sent me one last photo. Her dragging 2 giant suitcases out of the South Beach condo, getting into a taxi, alone. By 5 p.m., Mark was all alone, in a condo he no longer owned, with a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. So, the aftermath, the fallout. It wasn't as simple as just walking away. The legal mess was staggering. But it was his mess, not mine. The private lenders sued him. The IRS, moving faster than I've ever seen a government agency move, indicted him. Criminal fraud, tax evasion, forgery. It turned out he had siphoned money from his own startup, his intellectual property, and the investors in that company sued him too. He was facing legal battles on 4 different fronts, and he had no money, no lawyers. All the assets were seized and liquidated by the private lenders. They got their $8 million back, plus interest. The IRS took the rest, which still wasn't enough to cover the $4.8 million in income, plus penalties. He was, and still is, millions in debt to the government. A debt he can never discharge through bankruptcy. His trial was about 8 months later. I was called as a witness. I had to walk past him. I hadn't seen him since that mediation. He looked terrible. He'd lost 50 pounds. His hair was gray. The arrogance was gone. He looked small, pathetic. He wouldn't even look at me. I sat on the stand and I just told the truth. I told them about the LLC. I told them about the signatures. I told them about the day I found the files. My dad's letter, the one about the blackmail, was read into the court record. Jessica, the intern, even testified against him, cutting a deal to avoid any accessory charges. She said he'd promised her he was getting rid of the old wife, and they'd be rich. The whole thing was just sad. He was found guilty on all counts. The judge, I'll never forget this. The judge looked at him and said, "You are a man of immense privilege and intelligence, and you used all of it to destroy the one person who supported you. You didn't just break the law, you broke a sacred trust." He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. 8 years. And me? I started over. I took the $25 million from my dad, and I walked into that literary agency. I sat down in his office, and I cried for a week. I knew nothing about publishing. The employees all looked at me like I was a joke, this fragile divorcee playing CEO. And for the first 6 months, I was a joke. I was terrified. I was grieving. But then I remembered what my dad said. Use it as a weapon. Use it to be free. So I learned. I read every manuscript. I sat in on every meeting. I learned royalties and foreign rights and marketing. I found out I was good at it. I was good at spotting talent. I was good at managing people honestly. The company didn't just survive, it grew. Last year, we had our first nonfiction book hit #1 on the bestseller list. The author was a woman who had written an expose on financial abuse in marriages. Imagine that. I used the profits to start a foundation, the Jensen Project. We provide pro bono forensic accountants to women and men who suspect their partners are committing financial fraud. We give them the tools to find the truth. We give them the Chloe they need. It's been 3 years since I sat in that mediation room. My life is quiet. It's good. I bought a small house upstate. I have 2 dogs. I'm dating. Someone kind. Someone who knows nothing about startups and just likes to go hiking. Mark gets out on parole in 2 years. I don't care. He has no money, no reputation. He can't touch me. I finally feel safe. The signature I use now, my new signature, it's just my name. Sarah Jensen. It doesn't feel stolen. It feels mine. So, that's the story. It's been 3 years, and I'm finally breathing. But the question that Reddit always asks is, Aida, am I the asshole for letting him walk right into it? For not warning him? For playing the part of the broken wife while I had this giant, elaborate trap waiting for him? Or was this the only justice I was ever going to get? I really, really need to know what you think. Please comment below. I'll be reading every single one.